Anatomy Assignment 6 Screencast by Charlie Taylor. So we're going to go through the three main types of joints, which are fibrous joints, cartilaginous joints, and synovial joints. And firstly, we're going to go through the fibrous joints. So fibrous joints are fixed and do not allow any movement. They don't have any joint cavity and they are linked together by bands of fibrous tissue. An example of this type of joint is between the flat bones of the cranium. The joints in between the plates of the cranium are very strong, which assist with the protection of the brain when playing a sport. For example, in a football match, you may go up for a header and head the ball. Your joints would be the glue keeping the bones together to have a strong shield so that your brain won't get affected by the impact. The cranium also has sutures, which are wide and allow movement during infant years. It helps with the process of childbirth as the cranium is able to be more soft and flexible, making it easier for the process, and it makes it less painful for the process when it's happening. It's also why when holding a baby you have to support their head, as their head is not very strong, the bone is not very strong. If something was to hit it or to impact it, it could damage the brain very easily. However, as they get older, the cranium will start to become a lot stronger and become a proper skull. The next is the cartilaginous joints. So cartilaginous joints are only allow a slight movement, and this is because the pads of cartilage at the end of the bones are compressed. The ends of the bones of the joints are covered in articulate cartilage, and this is what connects all the joint together. These joints are also split by white fibrocartilage, which is used as a shock absorber when the joint may have a powerful impact. For an example of this type of joint is between most of the vertebrae in our backs, and another example of this joint is the pubis symphysis, which is basically the pelvis, and it's attached to the right and the left of the pubic bone. The next one is synovial joints. So there are 6 different types of synovial joints, which all allow free movement and have different roles when the body is moving. The structure of the joints are all specific to the movement that they provide. However, they are all linked via ligaments, and at the end of all the bones, they are covered in articulate cartilage. Even though they are known to be freely movable joints, some movements may be restricted due to the structure of the joint. So the 6 different types of synovial joints is pivot joint, hinge joint, condyloid joint, saddle joint, ball and socket, and gliding joint. They all provide the body with different types of movements, which will give an athlete a really good performance. So first of all, we're going to talk about the pivot joint. The structure of this joint is one bone has a rounded end and it fits into another bone which is in a ring shape, and it forms an axis. So the movement which it allows is only supination and pronation. An example of this is your neck, which allows your head to rotate round, and another example of the pivot joint is between the radius and the ulna, which is your lower arm, and it assists with the rotation of your forearm. A sporting example of when you would use this is in a football match. When you ask for the ball off of a teammate, you would place your arm out with your palm facing towards them to ask for the ball at your feet. The next joint is a hinge joint. The structure of this joint is made by 2 or more bones which can only move along one axis. One bone is a cylinder-shaped end, and it fits into a trough-shaped surface on another bone. It only allows the movement of flexion and extension, which is why it only moves along one axis. An example of this is your elbow, or it could also be your knee. A sporting example of when you would use this joint is when you kick a ball in football. Your knee would be the hinge joint and would allow flexing your leg when it bends backwards and allowing movement of extension as your leg comes forward to make the connection with the ball. The next joint is a condyloid joint. The structure of this is an articular surfaced bone with the end of it as a sort of egg-shaped and it fits into a bone with an oval cavity. The movement that it provides is adduction, abduction, flexion, extension, and circumduction. An example of this joint is in the wrist, and a sporting example of when you would use this joint is when a basketball player is dribbling with the ball. They're using their wrist to bounce it and move it in different directions, so you'd be using your wrist to do all that. The next joint is a saddle joint. The structure of this bone is shaped like a saddle, hence saddle joint, and the other bone is resting like a rider on a horse over the top. The movement that it allows is flexion, extension, adduction, abduction, and circumduction. An example of this is the thumb. A sporting example of when you would use a saddle joint is when you're doing a thumb war. To make it harder for the opposition, you're able to move your thumb side to side, back and forth, so that they are unable to pin it down easily. And this joint would help with the movement of side to side and back and forth. The next joint is the ball and socket joint. The structure of this is one bone has a rounded end and it fits into another bone which has a round socket. The movement that it allows is the flexion, extension, adduction, abduction, rotation, and circumduction. An example of this joint is at the shoulder or at the hip. A sporting example that you could use for this joint is a bowler in cricket. When they bowl, the joint would allow them to have a full rotation at the shoulder so that they're able to get power behind the throw, and it makes it faster and harder for the batter to make a good hit. And the last joint is the gliding joint. This has a unique structure, and as it allows has a flat shape of articulating surface, which allows bones to slide over each other, only letting them have a limited range of movement. The movements that it allows is inversion and eversion, and an example of this joint would be the carpals in the hands. So next we're going to go on to comparing and contrasting of all three of the main joints, and firstly we're going to go for the fibrous and cartilaginous joint. So one similarity between these two joints is that they both assist with the process of childbirth. As I said before, the fibrous joints in the skull are also held together by sutures, and in infant years they help with the childbirth because the skull is much more soft and flexible. And like I said, as we get older, the sutures allow the bones to get bigger, and as the brain gets bigger when we grow. The cartilaginous joint there's one located in the pubis symphysis, and it allows slight movement of the pelvis to get wider for the process to ease of childbirth. Another similarity with these two joints is that they are both put together by fibrous cartilage and tissue. Fibrous joints have fibrous tissue which hold them together. This is a tough type of tissue which can be used for protection and can also be used as a shock absorber. The tissue in the cranium assists with the protection of the brain. If there was an impact such as the header of a football, it is able to absorb the shock of the impact so it won't be able to damage the vital organ. Cartilaginous joints have fibrocartilage, which is also a tough and effective shock absorber. It also allows smooth movement, and it prevents friction between the bones when a movement occurs. Finally, the last similarity of these two joints is that they are both largely structured and cover large areas. Where the joints are placed, they're vital. For example, the skull is a vital part, and they would need to be largely structured as they both protect vital organs. Next, we're going to go on to the differences. So, one difference is that fibrous joints allow no movement at all, whereas cartilaginous joints allow slight movement. This is because fibrous allows no movement because they're more about protection. Another difference is that fibrous joints have have a role of protection, whereas cartilaginous joints have a role of allowing slight movement. And finally, a last difference is that fibrous joints have sutures and cartilaginous don't. Next, we're going to compare and contrast fibrous and synovial joints. So a similarity of these two joints is that as we get older, both joints become much stronger and more stable. So a fibrous joint, such as the skull, as I said before, during childbirth, it would be more soft and flexible. However, as we get older, the sutures would let the bones become more stronger and get bigger as we get older, because the brain gets bigger. A synovial joint, as we use them, our ligaments would get stronger and they'd become more stronger and stable. Another similarity is that both of these structures are made in a way which can prevent dislocation of the bones, and a last similarity is that both joints assist with an athlete with their performance and stop them from getting injured easily. A difference of these two joints is that there is only one type of fibrous joint, whereas there are many different types of synovial joints which have different roles. Another difference is that synovial joints have a capsule which holds synovial fluid, whereas fibrous joints don't have any fluid being held. This is because synovial joints, as they move much more, they would need to be lubricated so that there's no friction in between the bones, whereas fibrous joints don't allow any movement, so they wouldn't need to be lubricated because there would be no friction between the bones because they're not going to be moving over each other. The last difference is that synovial joints allow free movement in numerous directions, whereas fibrous joints are unable to move at all.